My love language is simple. No, thank you. I don't want words of affirmation. I don't want gifts. I just want to be left alone because it feels so much safer.
Something that makes me feel good, makes me feel loved, makes me feel seen. That's something that can be incredibly healthy and soul happy versus intellectual happy.
That's my friend and executive coach, Sunil Arora. Us dudes got together to talk about our love languages. And we cover the difference between being intellectually happy and soul happy, how different love languages can make marriage very challenging, and how to balance self-reliance with the human need for connection. Let's jump in. So Sunil, I wanted to kick us off with a conversation that we were having up in the East Bay in Northern California. We were having a lovely sushi lunch, and we were starting to talk about emotional needs and love languages and how we feel taken care of and seen. I'd love for you to replay it for our viewers and listeners.
Absolutely. So we were digging into this concept of being taken care of, asking for it and allowing for it. The roles that Khe, you and I play in our lives with the various forms of our identities that we're really proud of that I was mentioning, a lot of them inherently have a component where we are taking care of others. The paths we've decided to go down in the coaching space and related worlds aren't holding space for other people, aren't being in that sort of caretaker mode. I've been in this mode for a lot of my life, personally and professionally, with what's unfolded for me in life. And I've done some really deep inner work this year that helped me realize that I'm proud to hold that part of my identity as the caretaker, and for it to be sustainable and for me to feel whole, I also have to allow myself to be taken care of and ask for it, which goes against a lot of my upbringing, mindset, default actions in my life. And what came about in this conversation for us was me sharing that with you in conjunction with understanding what my love languages are in terms of how I best receive love and how I give love, and how that can create friction sometimes with people in your life when you're asking to be taken care of or allowing for it to happen. And so that interplay was a really fun one that we stumbled upon at that lunch.
Yeah. And so I'll replay from my perspective was that you had been on a few retreats, which we can talk about later. And you had these kind of realization. You're like, I'm such a caretaker, but I don't let myself, my words, not yours. Don't let myself get taken care of. And and you specifically asked me, or you specifically referenced two things. One was the you kind of you had invited me to come up to California, but it was also, you had asked to, like, we missed your birthday because of COVID, right? Your milestone birthday, and you had hosted this amazing birthday. And what you had shared was like part of, and it was like easy. And if I'm honest, it's like, oh, life got in the way. It was 3 years later. And I'm like, oh, I guess, yeah, one day it's like kind of like one day we'll do that thing, but we have young kids and all that shit. And you had kind of like asked, you're like, hey, like, can we do this this belated birthday celebration? Which I'm glad that you like asked, because I would have probably just demurred, and then eventually it would have happened, but probably like way later in the future. And then the other part was about asking to like have this conversation on the podcast, which was, we have the friendship, we have these shared ideas, and I'd never invited you to be on the podcast. And so I might just pause there as like just to like clarify that,
Yeah.
the chain of events, or the history is being retold accurate. It's funny how like you can have these conversations and you're like, wait a minute, like, is this actually, it was like 3 months ago or 2 months ago,
2 months
Is
ago.
this exactly
Absolutely.
what happened?
No, I love the richer context you provided there, and I'll fill in some more on my end. Uh, that was absolutely how it wonderfully unfolded in this organic way that we were discussing. So first, yeah, absolutely, in 2022, Millie and I were moving cross country with our boys that summer. I was turning 40 that summer, and you reached out to say, "Hey, when you get to California, I want to celebrate you. I'll come up to you, have you come down to LA." We had a wonderful celebration for your milestone 40th birthday a few years before that. You were just wonderful at offering that. I was genuinely touched by it, excited to do it. And then life happened and punched both of us in the face, actually, because um, shortly after that, right before we were getting ready to move, our dear mutual friend, Lainey, unexpectedly passed away. And we spent the summer grieving together and apart. Melly and I ended up driving cross country with our boys, and we landed in our new wonderful home in the East Bay. And a month later, um, one of my dearest friends, who we had bought a home a mile from, Micah, unexpectedly passed away. And so I was reeling for the rest of that year and to this day in a lot of ways
Yeah.
in terms of who these people were in my life. Uh, and at that point, wasn't thinking about anything in terms of celebration or coming back to you on it, and just let it go, right? And 2 years passed, and with the work I was doing on myself this year, just thinking about how I flex this muscle of asking to be taken care of and allowing for it, and that prompted me to come back to you to say, "Hey, you offered this a couple years ago, and I was really touched by it, and I'd love to take you up on it if you're
Yeah.
still game for it." And that was a really hard thing for me to do on two levels. One, it goes against all of my deeply thoughtful, considerate empathy
Mm,
wiring. Uh,
yeah.
hey, Kay's a busy guy with two young girls and running his own business, and this is a lot to ask. And it was a couple years ago, and he's a dear friend of mine. We're gonna have lots of experiences in life together. I don't need to put this on him. And two, from the place of, well, what if he says no? What does
Mm,
that mean? And it took a lot for me to come to a place of, no, if I'm going to build this muscle of
yeah.
asking to be taken care of and allowing for it, I got to put it out there. And so that was the
Yeah.
first dimension of the conversation, and happy to chat about the second one as well.
Yeah.
But that was the sort of led us into having this experience.
Yeah. When I received the text, it was like, it wasn't surprising. I mean, it was surprising in that, like, oh, I wasn't expecting that text. And at the same time, I would, maybe we'll talk about like the love language part. I'm like, oh, it's like that. That's like it's just an interesting. It's a unique way for like one guy to ask another guy. It's like, hey, you said this thing. I'm gonna take you up on it, right? And it wasn't
Yeah,
like a big deal, but it still involved like flying and being away from your families and all of that.
absolutely,
So
it was
that
a
was
big
like,
deal. Yeah.
yeah. And so that was a big thing. And one thing that I have always, when I reflect, when I think about myself, it's almost like I have this starting point and I need to do some healing from it. And I wonder how that compares to you. Is that like, I don't expect anything from anyone ever.
Yeah.
And I know it doesn't come from a healthy place. I think it comes from a deeply protective place. And this extends to like everyone that I care about. Even if like on Father's Day, like I don't expect my family to like do anything for me.
Hey, quick time out. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who thinks deeply and intentionally about your career, about your life, and about your relationships. But sometimes you might find yourself in a place feeling stuck, unmotivated, or just rudderless. If that's you, we have a coaching program for people looking to make a bold pivot and rediscover their aliveness. Just check out radreads.co/coaching. Now back to the video.
Yeah.
Right. And I suspect that, like I suspect that a lot of this is downstream from like immigrant parents, but specifically like my dad who lost, a majority, like basically everyone in his family during the Cambodian genocide and the internalized pain that he feels from that. Just, like with someone like my dad, there's no choice, right? Like no one's going to caretake for you in your family because they're dead. And so it's like, and then on top of that, moving to a foreign country, to a foreign land as an immigrant. And so it's just, I received your request, and I'm like, rationally, it makes total sense. Like, I mean, at the most primitive level, it's like, it's something I said I would do. Like, of course, like, you have the right to redeem it, but instantly, and I see this often in my other relationships with people, I'm like, but I would never do that because I don't need to ask, or, like that's like the wiring. So I wonder if like, do you have that? Like, because you said that you need to ask to be taken care of, but you
Yeah.
don't strike me as someone who like pushes like that, like maintains an emotional distance from people. But maybe I'm wrong on
Yeah. No, I don't. That's a great nuance. I don't maintain an emotional distance. I'm emotionally close to everyone in my life, people I work with,
Mhm.
my friends, my family. But a lot of it comes from what I put out there and realizing that for me, it's sort of closeness is often initiated by things I'm doing or actions I'm taking or just things I'm holding in my heart, mind, and actions for them. Right. But what you're sharing is bringing up a fascinating continuum for me around on one end of this expecting, right, which I think can lead to attachment, and we could go down a beautiful rabbit hole on attachment from a Buddhist standpoint, and that being the root of all suffering. Right. On the other end is um, uh, never expecting, right, or sort of almost what I'm hearing from you is stiff arming it. I'm not going to allow for that, right? And where I find myself wanting to find a comfortable home is in the middle of just being able to ask for it and to allow for it, but being careful not to expect it. And
Yeah.
I think for me, I've probably veered on the side of expectation versus not expecting. Right?
Okay.
If you're kind of looking at both of us, you never expect it and
Yeah.
never want it on some level. But for
Yeah.
me, I was closer to expecting it um, and not always being conscious to that or understanding how I'm expecting the love to be shared or appreciation to be shared. And the work I'm doing on myself is to be conscious to that and find that middle ground, which I think
Yeah.
can allow for content, mutually connected, loving relationships, whether it's with your partner or your friend or a client or anybody, of being in that middle ground of fundamentally understanding what you need and be able to ask for it.
Yeah. It's true. It's like this expectation part. So do you think that like before you kind of did the work and went to inward to understand what was happening in yourself, do you think that you had these expectations and then they didn't materialize and you were disappointed a lot? Is that
That's exactly right. Right. But I would put my disappointment away from a place of consideration, empathy, sort of rationalizing it and not
got
letting
it?
myself feel it or share it and not putting it on other people either. Right. And
Yeah.
so I love what you're bringing up around expectation or, being on one end of, I never expect my family to do anything for me on Father's Day. And thinking about what the other end looks like of constantly expecting, which I wasn't in
Yeah.
that realm, but I was maybe closer to it,
Yeah.
which again is fine to be. There's no wrong place to be on this
Yeah.
continuum as long as you understand what's driving that and where it comes from. Right? That sort of self
Yeah.
awareness piece that I think is the key to everything for us.
Yeah. It's funny because like for me, it's like no expectation. So everything is like a bonus if it
Mm,
happens. And then for you, that starts from more of a place of expectation. It's
yeah.
like you can only be disappointed, right? It's like because if you get it, you were expecting it, and if you didn't, it's great. So I can definitely say for me that it's like this is a strategy to avoid disappointment, right? If you
Mm,
don't expect anything from anyone, you can never be disappointed.
Yeah. And what would happen if people were disappointed?
I think that if I was disappointed, I think that I think for me it like leads to like all roads lead to abandonment,
Yeah.
right? So if like if someone is willing to disappoint you, then it means that they don't care about you, and so they can or will abandon you, right? But it's ironic because if you push everyone away, you've almost secured your own abandonment, right? You've secured your own isolation, right? And that is something that I have learned. I think we spoke about it, but we could speak about it for the podcast. Is that for me, a lot of like I learned through Jess Morey, who was one of our podcast guests, that a lot of my meditation was probably spiritual bypass, which is basically using a spiritual practice to disassociate from, you know, bad thoughts, uncomfortable thoughts.
Yeah.
And so meditation is actually, especially because I did a lot of the kind of like mind emptying meditation where it's like have, no thoughts and things like that. So it's like if you have this fear of being alone, abandoned,
Yep.
then you can kind of like, you can basically and this is not the point of meditation, but this is how it gets misused. You can basically train yourself to not have thoughts about anything, including the
Yep.
fear of being abandoned.
Yep.
And so what's been really interesting for me, and I'd love to then hear how you've like addressed this, is to a lot of my meditations now are learning to receive love.
Yep.
And it's weird. Like I'll do these meditations where I'll take like a spiritual figure or a friend. It's usually not a spouse or a family member because that love can be a little messy. But take like a friend, like our friend Lanny, and then they're just radiant of love. And the meditation is just like, how do I, Kay, receive this love from this amazing human who really is like pure? The love is the purest form. And how do I like actually like take it in, accept it, feel it? And that's been a big part of kind of reversing this like abandonment fear.
And what form do you need to receive the love in?
I mean, this is so it's funny. This is one thing that's really hitting me is I'm learning that my Wall Street career to my influencer career, for lack of a better word. Please don't think that I view myself as an influencer, but it's a easier label. Is so I left. One of the reasons why I love being an influencer is that I can basically create validation on command. So like I can go on LinkedIn after
Yep.
this recording and just be like,
Yep.
this is the magic window and blah, blah, blah. And I spent 6 nights away from home on average for the past 10 years. And then I'll get 15 comments that are like, wow, I've never thought about it that way. You're so incredible, Kay. Like your daughters are the luckiest people on earth. So what it looks like is that. And I love that shit. So I think that what I've learned is I've learned to channel achievement into validation as basically a substitute for love.
And when you think about receiving love in the meditation, what form is it coming to you in?
I mean, I'm really actually in that specific meditation. I am observing the bodily sensations that are happening.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to
Yeah.
get past the intellectual definition of love. Like, of course, Lisa loves me. Of course, my girls love me. Lanny loves me. You love me.
Right.
My friends love me. It's moving beyond that. And, it's almost like I've been thinking a lot about the difference between like being intellectually happy
Yeah.
and like knowing in your soul that you're happy. And I think for a long time, I was intellectually happy and soul unhappy. And I think intellectually, I know that I'm very well loved, but my soul doesn't know how to experience that love. And so there's a giant disconnect. And so in that specific case, it is really like accessing it through the body and not through intellect.
But bring it to what your love language is. How do you best receive love?
And so in a more pragmatic way,
Yeah, if
like
you're
in a
talking
more
about the
everyday
five love,
sense.
exactly.
So there's an interesting thing about my dynamic with Lisa is that she tends to withhold praise from me. And the reason why is because I get so much praise from like being online.
Yeah.
That she's just like, what's the point?
Yep.
Like, it's just going to fall into like, imagine like this like giant, tip jar suggestion box thing, and it's just going to be another entry in this giant thing. I think there's a much longer conversation in that, and we should go there at some point in this conversation. That she wants to receive love through words of affirmation, right? So her love language is receiving love through words of affirmation.
Yep.
My love language, I joke, is no thank you. But I guess if I had to really think about how I would receive it, it would also be through words of affirmation.
Yeah.
I'd have to think about what are the love languages: words of affirmation, acts of service, touch,
quality time, and gifts.
And gifts.
Those are the five. Yeah.
Yeah. I would probably say and usually when it's funny because we're doing a podcast on love languages, I don't even know what they are. But when people talk about love languages, they're usually referring to how they want to receive love. Is that correct?
Yeah. But I think it's a really important thing about how you most effectively
how you give it
and not conflating to just because I receive this way doesn't mean everyone wants to receive it that way.
Yeah. And so Lisa wants to receive words of affirmation, and I give love through acts of service. Like if she's upset, I will fucking clean the house. Yeah. Like I'll fucking clean the garage. Right. That's the last thing she wants. And in fact, if I really am honest with myself, in those moments, I treat those as very disassociative activities. It's like I just like put on the headphones and I can go clean the garage, and like, you can't be mad at me. I'm fucking cleaning the garage.
Yeah. It's really interesting how hard it is for you to access the language with which you receive love. We landed on I guess, words of affirmation.
Yeah.
Right? You quickly, you know how Lisa receives it. You know how you instinctively give it. Like she receives it through affirmation, you give it through service. But we still haven't arrived. You ever come by default? You've arrived at. I guess it would be words of affirmation for me.
Yeah, I because initially I said praise, but I think praise. I have an ego, and I have sometimes narcissistic tendencies, so it probably would be. But so let me ask you: how do you? If someone listening is like, they have the same reaction. I know that someone listening has the same. Like, I think first they don't know what the 5 options are. And then they're like, I guess it's this. What is like, how does one get in, like, how did you, what is your receiving love language? And how did you get to know that it was the case?
Yeah, a great question. I think a helpful guide for folks, because these are murky. You can have more than one as well, probably like a primary and secondary situation. For me, it's words of affirmation. That's how I best receive love. And I like to think I can flex my way into giving it in all the forms, and try to be thoughtful around understanding what someone else's love language is to give them love in that way. But to break it down again, it's acts of service, words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, and gifts. And I think the path to figuring out what it is the same path to just understanding yourself. And it's really important for me. It was a challenging journey because there was a lot of judgment in realizing this, and then going into my head to say, dude, why do you care so much? Like, why do you need someone to, sincerely wish you a happy birthday or send you a loving note on that time? Or why do you need
Yeah.
Millie to affirm you in this way or tell you how much she appreciates what you do for her and the family when you know that to be true? Right. And so I
Yeah.
spent a long time, honestly, uh, most of my life, quite frankly, judging myself for wanting words of affirmation.
So you mentioned like, so you would, it would make you happy if now I'm like selfishly, learning, learning my spot. Cause it's funny. Cause I think that, and we'll get to this, but I think that our pairing, so me and Lisa are inverted
Yep.
Sunil and Millie. And so if Millie or a friend just turned to you and you're like, "Hey, I just want to tell you that you're an incredible father, you're an incredible friend," like how would that feel?
The ultimate for me. When
The
it's
ultimate.
there's specific, genuine, hey, you're an amazing friend because you do this for me, or
Yeah.
hey, I appreciate what you do for our family because of that. When you can feel it to be authentic and
Yeah.
genuine and specific to something, it's more than any gift, act of service, physical touch, quality time.
That's
Uh, it just hits really deep
that's
for
so
me.
fucking wild. Cause like it's weird. I just don't expect anyone to ever say that to me. Like I'm just like, why would anyone say that to me? Like it's like they could think it cool. Like I guess
Yeah,
like, and then I go inward. I'm like, I know this about myself that I am
yeah.
a good dad or a good husband and all that. But it is like that's so fascinating because I'm like so bewildered.
Yeah.
And you're a dear friend of mine, Lisa, my wife. Like I get it, I get the like other side of it. And like still, there's like a part of me that's just like, and I consider myself pretty empathetic, but I'm just like, I don't get it,
But it's interesting in that every time you bring it up for yourself, it goes straight to the expectation. I don't
Yeah,
expect anyone to
yeah,
ever say that
you're
to me.
spot on.
And there's a distinction between expecting and wanting,
Mm, yeah,
or expecting and appreciating that this makes me feel good.
yeah,
Because again, I'm going to join your camp on rejecting expectation. Expectation leads
yeah,
to attachment, right? None of
yeah,
us need to go
yeah,
down the path of attachment. But the point of um, wanting something or knowing that this is something that makes me feel good, makes me feel loved, makes me feel seen,
yeah,
that's something that can be incredibly healthy and
yeah,
soul happy versus intellectual happy, right? To
yeah.
your beautiful analogy from before.
And you know what that brings up for me is that when I hear you say that, I'm like, maybe I just have a dark view of human nature
Mm,
where I'm just like, maybe it's not expectation. It's almost like the baseline way that people interact with one another is to not show that. Right. And so it's actually interesting because in one of the meditations that I do, again, I think this goes between this distinction between like intellectually happy and like soul happy
yeah,
is in one of the meditations I do, I sit and I just observe my body. And every time I feel some sensation in my body, I note the associated emotion. And if I don't know what it is, I just say something.
yeah,
Um, they call it's a noting feeling states meditation. And I've probably noted, so, you'll note things like every couple of seconds. And I've done this for almost a year now. And I'll tell you that it's basically like 33% fear that's noted, fear slash worry, 33% um, sadness, and 33% like some combination of like, don't know, worry, anxiety, not, sometimes I'll say like not enoughness. And then there's probably been, like maybe like 50,000 labelings over the past year. It's been like joy or love, like a total of 6 times. And
Yeah.
so I think that like maybe that's like, so that's to me, that's a very clear example of like intellectually happy, soul like scared or, impaired. I don't want to use a deficient term, but like soul sadness.
Yeah.
Um, and that probably frames, maybe it's not the expectation that someone turned to me and be like, oh, you're a great person. It's just like this like belief that no one actually like believes it.
Yeah.
It's a pretty dark view of human nature.
If I were to say to you right now, a deeply held belief I have, which is you and the courageous path you went down with the writing you did from day one, and especially a framework of abundance over scarcity that you introduced to me, has been the foundation of my work and has cascaded into uh, thousands of coaching engagements I've done over the last decade. And that's all attributed to you. And I have a deep well of gratitude for you and a deep admiration for you for introducing abundance over scarcity and sharing it vulnerably, openly, honestly. And we'll be forever indebted to you for that. What comes up when you hear that?
Mm. Well, first, thank you. It Thankfully I've learned to um just like hear it and breathe. You could maybe see me like I was just breathing it in.
Yeah.
Because the instant tendency would be to just either like make a joke or to deflect it back. Probably like if it wasn't you, what I would say is like, oh, it was already in you. I just like I
Yeah.
just opened the can or something, like something like that kind of diminishes my role in it and puts it back on you as like a form of deflection. Um, because of the setting, because it's you, because of this, I mean, you as the relationship that I have with you, but you and like, I know how you, like you, I know your soul better than many others. There's an openness, but I really like I have to like concentrate, like, okay, like he's saying something nice. It's very sincere. You want to deflect this. Don't
Yeah.
deflect it. Hear it. Like, and then the next thing I'll say is actually like try to feel this in your body. Cause I
Yeah.
have found that like feeling these things in my body help take me out of this kind of like cerebral, like into like, you know, it's like like my brain's like a fucking Benihana, it's just like chop, 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 like, so I thank
Amazing.
you.
Amazing
And I think
visual.
that you can, but if you had said that a year ago, I would have,
Yeah.
I would have been gracious. I would have listened. But in my head, I'd be like, he's just saying that to be nice.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't really mean it.
Absolutely.
Like he means it, but he's exaggerating, right? Like it's not as profound as, as I'm picturing it to be. It's just like someone being like, oh, like, did you like the weather today?
Yeah.
Like what a
Trying to
beautiful
make
day.
you feel better, or you just saying it for the sake of saying it.
Yeah.
You just, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for receiving it as well. You just unfolded what I think is a beautiful path to share with our people listening today, which is kind of a more detailed answer to your question of, hey, I'm not really sure the best way in which I can receive love. How should I think about this? Sure, you can read the book, you can read the framework, but I'm still kind of unclear. These are all good ways to receive love. And what unfolded for you was the same thing that unfolded for me that I think we can share with folks, which is being conscious to something that you reflexively reject or push away when it comes. First step. Then something that you maybe are conscious of, but then judge yourself for. Right. And then get more curious about the various forms in which it shows up. So let's take another language. It might be physical touch.
Yeah.
Right. I, as you know, am a
World's best hugger.
just absolutely love a good hug. Right. Love sharing energy, getting energy. And I have dear friends of mine who it makes them really uncomfortable for me to give
Really?
them a full 15, 20-second hug. And of course, every time I see them, I, try to hold them in a longer grasp and hug you.
Do they say something? Or you could just tell from their body
Yeah, you can
language?
tell, or like it's it's a joke between us. No, I'm not going to give you a real hug, right? So, okay,
Have you
there's some
always
rejection
been
going on.
a genuine hugger? Because like the first couple of times I met you, 10 years ago, I'm like, wow, this guy really, he really knows how to fucking hug. He cares about his hugs.
Yeah, it's
There's no
something where
bro hug, pat
no,
on the backness here. Like it is like a bear hug.
something I've always been connected to. I sort of became maybe conscious to it about halfway through my life, but appreciating sharing and getting energy that way with people. But if you're someone who's rejecting that physical touch, whether it's a hug or another way of appropriate physical touch, depending on the relationship, or when it happens, you then say like, why do I need to get a back rub this much, or why do I need to get hugged to feel better? Like, that's not a thing. Get over it. You can be happy and content without that. That might be a signal that actually physical touch is my love language, right? Similarly to you for affirmation, I used to reflexively reject it whenever it came in the surface level absurd form of, hey, Sunil, I really like that shirt. Oh, I just got it on sale somewhere. I mean, what kind of absurd response to "I like that shirt" is explaining the origin of how you bought it, right? But it was that's how I was going to deflect it, right? Then to realizing that, like, no, actually, that makes me feel good. That makes me feel loved, being affirmed in whatever way. Why do you need that so much, still? Well, what's up with your ego, or why do you need some words or someone to write or say something that already is true? Why can't you just get over it, right?
Yeah.
And I went through that from rejection to judgment to where I am now. You segue to one of my favorite lines from Ted Lasso. Be curious, not judgmental, right? Where I'm just curiously exploring how affirmation shows up for me, or how I can be taken care of or asked to be taken care of, and not just words that are spoken or written. And this right here, us having this conversation, the second part of our lunch conversation, was me realizing, oh, you know what? Another way in which I would feel affirmed by a dear friend and soul brother in Khe is if he asked me to come on to this incredibly deep, holistic podcast he has to have a conversation about one of the things we riffed on in life before. Right?
Yeah.
And so I flex the muscle of asking for that. Hey, can we have a conversation sometime on the podcast about one of these things? Incredibly uncomfortable for me to do that. I told you in the moment. It was afterwards I felt that way too. When you followed up to say, hey, let's do that. I was like, oh man, I'm putting this on him. I don't know if this is in the flow of the conversations he wants to have. Like, I don't want him to do this out of some love or obligation for me. Right. So that's not a classic case. You're a great friend, because it was just being affirmed in a different way. Right. So I'm in that curious phase now of, hey, what are the ways in which you feel affirmed from people? And, flex the muscle of asking for it, of allowing for it. I almost, to be completely transparent with you, I almost said no after you asked to do this.
Oh. How come?
I almost said, hey, thank you, appreciate you for following up so thoughtfully, but I don't know if this is going to fit the flow of all the incredible guests you're having, these experts you have on. You and I just riffing on something that is meaningful to both of us and probably other people.
It's almost like the sale thing. It's like just like or it's like a deflecting, like actually, like this probably wasn't a good idea, like
absolutely,
it was my idea, but it probably wasn't a good idea, like
I asked for it, okay, I built that muscle, I'd be proud of it, but now I'm going to allow for it. Kay's got enough stuff going on. Is this going to be that helpful to him and his business, or does he really want to have this conversation? Let me just,
Yeah.
I'm shit you not. I came really close to saying, hey, this I feel like I might be forcing it. So like, love you, but let's not do it.
Yeah. No.
And I got moved past that to say, nope, this is, asking and allowing.
Yeah. And it's so wild. Like, I hope people, like, we are really good friends with like a very high level of trust. And it's just like, it's so wild that, like, because we trust each other and we're both pretty self-aware, like, we can like give you listeners the play by play of like, this is what I was feeling when I asked for the thing. This is what happened when I received it. This is what like, it's like this, it's
Yeah.
like crazy. And I hope people can realize that, like, I guess like the takeaway that I see is that like, even two self-aware friends can be like there's just a lot of like stories and noise that come up. Right.
Absolutely. But why this is also hard, and I love talking about it with you to share it with folks, because it shows up in your personal life, your professional life, and this is from you and I being immersed in it with crazy
I
forms of mental
know.
exercise we have done for the last decade plus,
Yeah.
deepening our self-awareness, excavating sort of daily, and it still comes up. Like, all of this has literally happened 2 months ago for us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And we've known each
With
other for a decade. Yeah.
a decade, right?
Ish. Yeah, that is wild. So I wanted to, so I'm curious that, like, if one, because I think it's probably pretty common that one spouse is words of affirmation, especially in like kind of professional couples. It's probably pretty common that like one spouse is words of affirmation and the other is like acts of service. I would
Yeah.
suspect that, and I just know empirically, just through my peer group, I've seen that that's loosely like a pretty common pairing. And I'm happy to share as well, like, what has been challenging about that, or how do you kind of work around it, right?
Uh, yeah. So, more than happy to share on this front. So, for clarity, again, I best receive love through affirmation, and Millie most naturally gives love through acts of service.
Okay, so it's exactly
Right, and
like me and Lisa in
that's
the
right,
inverted way.
right. And she best receives love through probably acts of service. Quality time might be a tie for her. Quality time is
Yeah.
sort of a shared love language for us. We just love spending as much time with each other and with us as a family unit as we can.
Mhm.
But I probably, acts of service in that way as well. Although we've been meaning to sort of go there together for a while to more deeply understand hers.
Mhm.
But for me, that's the case. And the challenge has been, uh, she gets it. She can tell
Yeah.
you in 3 seconds, hey, Sunil best received love. Oh yeah, words of affirmation, and she follows it
Mhm.
up with like, and I'm just not good at that. And for me, it was a challenge to understand over time. Like, why is this so hard for you? Like, to
Mhm.
say the thing,
Yeah.
to write the thing, and it came from appreciating her background. One of my closest friends in life and a dear colleague of mine, uh, Prakash, was uh, listening to me talk about this a couple of years ago, and he just stopped and said, "Snell, do you know the family Millie came from?" I said, "Yeah, of course. I've gotten to know her family well. You told me all about her amazing parents and brother. That's not a household in which that was modeled for her or that was a part of her upbringing. It's just a muscle she doesn't have." I was like, "Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
of course." It took someone else sharing that
Yeah.
back to me to realize it. Right? Of course, I knew that dynamic intellectually to be true, but it took someone else highlighting that. So it was a challenge for a while, not understanding why the person couldn't simply um,
Yeah.
do this thing, right? And I kind of got past that by understanding the roots of it and
Mhm.
appreciating that. And in full, incredible credit to Millie, over time, she's absolutely built this muscle to
Yeah.
be able to share words of affirmation or affirming. in other ways, at times, knowing how meaningful that is to me, and knowing that
Yeah.
that's the way in which um, I receive love. And my own growth journey has been to not judge myself for it, to hold it, and also to appreciate the other ways in which she gives love. Perfect
Mhm.
example. She travels a lot for her wonderful job, as you know, and she'll be gone for 4 or 5 days, a month at times. And before she leaves, she will cook for 36 hours straight and fill the entire fridge for me and the
Wow.
boys with the most healthy, delicious, varied food. Won't ask
It's amazing.
me for help. Will take time away
Mhm.
from us as a couple or a family to do it. She'll stay up late, get up crazy early, and she just does it. And
Yeah.
that's her act of service. And I've come to over time to appreciate. You know what? Let me appreciate her love for me and us coming through this way.
Yeah.
Right? Let me sort of take a step back to do that. So that's been the journey for us to be able to see that of, hey, where does it come from in terms of difficulty of flexing
Yeah.
a certain language, and then still asking for it, right? Because in the judgment mode, when I was understanding why it's hard for her, don't put that on her. Get over
Yeah.
yourself. You can appreciate love in a different way. But I moved past
Yeah.
it to say, nope, that's still the dominant way for me, and I'm gonna hold that proudly. And I can also appreciate it coming in other ways.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, because it's I don't think many people could explain, forget love language, just explain like a relationship, like a marriage dynamic so clearly. And the two of you are like, I really admire um yeah, I admire the way, just the way you love and care about each other, and the way you show up for each other. So it's been just really beautiful and unique. Like, I mean, I'm around a lot of married couples, and the plane on which the two of you operate is very unique. Compared to the comps. Let's just say
Thank you. That means a lot, and I appreciate that.
it's funny for me and Lisa. So she would turn to me and she'd be like, "What do you love about me?" Like, in like a random Tuesday afternoon. I'm like, if you know me, like random Tuesday afternoon, I'm like, there's like a place and a task that is, meant to be done in that moment. And, expressing, how I feel about someone in a matter. I don't think for me, it's not that well, it is difficult, but it's not difficult because I'm not capable of it. I'm a fucking writer. Like, I'm very in touch with feelings and nuances of feelings, and words and phrases and turns of phrases, and you name it. But I think the hard part of it was like just like doing it on command, right? And
Yeah.
then it just turned into this thing where it's like, well, I have this need and you can't fulfill it, but like Lisa would say to me, if like you like, she's like, I hear you on the phone with like some kid you just met off Twitter, and you're just telling him how incredible it is that he's achieved so much in such a short lifespan, and like you're
Yeah.
like fully engaged and all that. I'm like, yeah, good point. Um, and so I think that was part of it, but I I honestly think that the bigger part of it was, it's almost like it's really like very like flipped. Like, in many ways, you and I are very like emotionally flipped and inverted in certain things. And it was just like, what's the point? Like,
Mhm.
why does anyone even like, what's the point of this conversation? Right. And that's because my baseline was always of like, what's the point? Like, no one's gonna do this for me. So, why, like, I think I have this very like, it's almost like, it's like self-reliance. Like, I'm like so addicted to self-reliance, which is not even true. I've come to learn that self-reliance is it's kind of like a mirage of sorts, right? It's like, my parents did this for me, my friends did this for me, my teachers did this for me, my mentors
Yep.
did this for me, my colleagues did this for me. But I like suck at the teat of self-reliance, that it's just like, like I've just taken it so far again, like a protective measure that I'm just like, why? Like, it's almost like when someone's like, oh, I'm like struggling to get promoted. I'm like, well, why don't you just work hard? Like, why don't you do
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z? Like, isn't it obvious to you?
Yeah.
And so I think that was part of it. We have that dynamic where, there is like some withholding. There's almost like a competition of sorts, right? So there's like some games happening there. But one thing that has really helped, and hopefully this can help listeners too, is that it's probably less about the affirmation and it's more just like Lisa will say, like, can you just come towards me more often?
Mhm.
Right. And for someone who's like very independent, very self-reliant, just kind of always doing shit, coming to someone other than my kids, like my kids really get the best version of me more than any other relationship I have in the world. And like if there's like a big gap, which is probably another thing worth investigating on my end, it's like, why is it so easy for them? And like, there's like struggle for everyone else. But coming towards me, and I think one thing that has really worked for both of us is that we've started to realize that we both have, and everyone has, certain pains and wounds from their upbringing, right? And I think
Yep.
that what we've often realized is that in this love language debate, it's really like I have this unmet, unhealed wound or this unfilled need from like deep in my soul, like from childhood, and you have this unmet need, and like they're trying to heal, and then we're using whatever love, words of affirmation as a way to heal them. And it is true that
Yeah.
partners can heal one another. They play a critical role in healing one another, and it's also untrue that like and simultaneously a lot of healing is independent of your partner.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that we've come to a healthy place where we can very clearly see that like patterning in ourselves. Lisa does it better than me in just like calling it out. So she'll, we might have a disagreement over something, and I'll like, me during conflict, I just shut down. I'm trying really hard to not, but it's that disassociative tendency that I have. So we'll have a conflict. I'll feel attacked, even though I'm not. I'll disassociate and just like go to like Kay's La La Land. Um, and then that reinforces the situation because she's like, I just want to feel something from you, and you're like running in the other direction, right? So you could see how that cycle can like perpetuate. Now, what happens is like those triggers will still happen because they're actually germane to us as individuals. But then we can call, she's like, she might say something like, when I said that to you, like, I recognize that that wasn't me talking. That was like
Yeah.
this deeper wound. And, and then she'll say, I love you and whatever words of affirmation. And then likewise, I can then, I'm not as good at it as it. And I tend to like, um, it's almost like winning the argument type thing. Like I don't want to
Yeah.
like engage sometimes. Like my ego doesn't want to engage because I'm hurt. I feel attacked, and then I'll say like, well, when I reacted that way, it's like my disassociative tendencies, and like I know you weren't trying to attack me, but I felt attacked, and whenever I feel attacked, I just disassociate and run in the other direction. But I was trying to, like, you might have noticed like me paying attention to my breath so that I like at least had a shot at being present, right? And so couples around us, they'll hear us and they'll be like, you guys talks through, like you spend like 20 minutes talking through, like it wasn't even a fight. It was just like, should we get broccoli tonight? And they'll be like,
Right.
well, like, what do you feel? What does your intuition say about broccoli? And like, in one regards, it's almost like a meta love language of sorts where we can kind of like rise above that and be like, there are these needs and maybe they're expressing like they're like these like soul needs and soul
Yeah.
yearnings and soul sadness that are just like somehow, you know, engaging with one
Yes.
another. And like, can we acknowledge like almost like just like calling them out, right? It's just like it disarms them. Where I mean, we've seen countless examples like when, you know, when someone like snaps at someone, it's like, you know, like like why'd you, you know, why didn't you take the trash out, like dishwasher, right? Like they're not like snapping at the dishwasher, right? It's like the injustice in the marriage or what, the inequality. So like being able to like separate those things.
Yeah. What do you think Lisa means when she says, "Can you just come towards me more?"
I think it kind of goes back to that like kind of dark baseline view of like human nature that I'm honestly realizing it for the first time in this conversation, that just like we're like these isolated human beings that just like have to fend for themselves because no one's coming to like, no one has your back, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, coming towards her is like reminding her that we're a team, you know, that
Yeah.
we're a unit, you know. Like I can be like, I'm not very affectionate in that regards, like just like laying around the house and things like that. Like I guess, you know, in one way is like I'm a very kind of quote unquote serious person. And it takes a lot for me to like take off that serious armor, you know, it's like very protective armor. So I think in many ways it's almost like a just like mm, it's like it's a warmth. And that's the thing, is like I am a warm person. I am a caring person, but I do think I carry a lot of like armor around it that it's like doesn't always show up.
Yeah. To what you've uncovered today, right? That's a sort of, I don't have expectation of anyone
Yeah.
or anything, right? On that,
Mhm.
and you know, the challenge of you even accessing what your love language might be in terms of how you receive it. What I'm hearing from what you're sharing here in terms of Lisa's love language being words of affirmation, how she receives, as well as this point of "Can you come towards me more?" At the root of all of this is hers and every human being's fundamental desire to feel seen,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And what's coming to me is it's a helpful piece for folks to get over the judgment uh, phase of love language exploration, right? So when you're at you first discover it by what you're rejecting, realize, oh, I keep rejecting this. That's probably something that I actually want.
Mhm.
Now I'm judging myself for it. And uh, I think a way to move past that is to appreciate that all of us want to feel seen.
Yeah.
Right? No one
Yeah.
feels bad about that. No one judges themselves for it. But if you think about this in the terms of, oh, IK feels seen by someone demonstrating acts of service or giving me physical touch or quality time or words of affirmation, that feels different when you contextualize it that way. All right.
Mhm.
Because, you know, in this dynamic for you and Lisa, she's just going about this in sort of different angles of, I just want to feel seen, deeply seen by you
Mhm.
in a way that I've
Yeah.
experienced our daughters feeling seen by you,
Yeah.
right? In
Yeah.
terms of you giving your best self to them. And
Mhm.
I love the framing you led with today of, you know, intellectually happy versus soul happy. Because I think it's
Mhm.
important when we're having these uh, deeply privileged, you know, sometimes navel gazing conversations around
Mhm.
topics like this. To say like, what's this in service of, or you know, what's this about?
Mhm.
And at its fundamental core, what I think it's about is um, moving from intellectual happiness to soul happiness, to
Yeah.
felt happiness, right?
Yeah.
And the intellectual happiness movement, you and I have read about, talked about, you've written extensively about, um, you know, rings hollow for most
Yeah. Yep.
after a certain sort of distance traveled on it, whether it's
Mhm.
through, you know, productivity tools or
Yeah.
self-help
Talk
books or
therapy.
whatever else, talk therapy, right?
Yep.
The soul happiness comes from somatic work going into your body, something you and I've talked
Yeah.
about extensively this year, doing that for the first time. And then I think it can come from this appreciation or exploration of receiving love, right?
Yeah.
So
Love.
from my perspective, why are we talking about this? Why is this important? Why should everyone understand the ways in which they best receive love and the people around them receive love? It's in service of that soul happiness that is going to help you show up in all dimensions of your life in a more grounded way, right? As the husband, as the father, as the coach, as the podcaster, the writer, the musician. And so that just came to me as you were describing this. And I was thinking about, where Lisa was going with it, and appreciating that that's really what it's just being seen. Everyone wants to feel seen. Everyone is comfortable with that. And it makes people feel great. The love language is the vehicle to be seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, that is a beautiful place to end a beautiful conversation, which, we won't replay all the machinations that went into it happening, but it happened and people will get to hear this. And I think it's funny. And I love this. I mean, I love that it's like, what's your love language is the name of the episode. And then people are going to click in and it's like two brown men talking about it. So couldn't be more on brand. So we didn't do justice to your bio, but you're a tremendous coach that has worked with many people in our community and a lot of our mutuals. And where can people learn more about you, reach out to you?
Thanks for asking that. I run a professional coaching practice working with leaders who are building things and working through the challenges of life. Alongside that, people who are in or approaching big transitions, and small business owners and solopreneurs. I am wonderfully, weirdly offline for the most part, but people can find me on LinkedIn. Always happy to connect with folks that way and share about the work I do, explore it together, and just connect with other humans. Anyone who comes to me from having listened to this and knowing Khe is immediately golden in my book, because I'm currently batting 1,000 with every person I ever talked to who's come to me through you. Some more affirmation for you in terms of the network and community that you've built and you maintain. So it's always a true pleasure to connect with anyone in your ecosystem, from sharing, learning, and loving together.
Amazing. Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you. Appreciate you, brother.